is one of a series of learning opportunities that you and your sites will participate in over the next few months. This particular video on youth and family engagement is offered by the Backbone team. My name is Jana Kosodek, Manager of Standards and Engagement, and with me are Kelli Dilworth, Renee Nossal, who are the engagement coaches within the Backbone, along with Josianne Fernandez, a youth advisor, and Sarah Cannon, a family engagement specialist. You will hear from them shortly. This video was created as a response to the collective need to better understand how engagement fits into integrated youth services model. There are 3 learning objectives for today. So first, to explain meaningful engagement principles and practices and why they are important in the context of YWHO integrated youth services. Second, to identify ways to apply core components of youth engagement. And third, to describe ways to engage family within a youth-driven care model. So after each section, you'll be presented with various questions for your team to discuss relating to the learning objectives that were just mentioned.
So before diving into engagement work, we want to quickly review why integrated youth services are such an important part of supporting youth in mental health and substance use. So to do this, we'll start with the why. We've heard from youth and families that our system needs fixing. So we need to intervene early and integrate our efforts. Preventative interventions aimed at youth between the ages of 12 and 25 provide greater personal, economic, and social impacts than interventions or preventative efforts carried out at any other time. So as you may know, there are already 10 YWHO integrated youth sites, across the province of Ontario. And each of them went through a selection process that included youth and family voice. And so this integrated youth service model has been adopted in different areas across the country and even across the globe.
The goal of our work with the YWHO IYS sites is the right kind of service at the right time by the right provider in the right place. When we heard from youth and families, they told us loud and clear what they want. Based on this feedback, Integrated Youth Services developed a model that aims to provide rapid access with evidence-based interventions where services are integrated and co-created with youth and families.
Great. So as mentioned, youth and families have been included and engaged throughout the creation and the implementation of YWHO IYS. So Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario Integrated Youth Services has a number of core values that have been there since the very beginning. And so one of our core values is engagement and co-creation of services. And so we've heard from youth and families, they've voiced this, that these are the things that they want and hope for. So on the left, on the slide, you'll see a visual of some of the comments and thoughts from youth and families that were a part of the initial conversations when the model was being developed. And really it grounds what integrated youth services are today.
First, we want to acknowledge that folks listening to this video are most likely people who already have a very strong understanding of what youth engagement is. We recognize that this is already embedded into the work that you do on a daily basis. To ensure a common language around youth engagement, to make sure that we're all on the same page, this section will focus on the principles and practices of youth engagement. I'm now going to pass things over to my colleague, Josianne, who is the youth advisor with the Backbone team.
Let's talk about what we mean by youth engagement. Youth engagement empowers young people to be valuable partners in making decisions about things that affect them personally and or that they believe in to be important. It is an active and ongoing process that embeds youth representation and voice at all levels of planning, implementation, and evaluation activities. Meaningful youth engagement ensures that youth are involved as co-creators. Within the integrated youth services, youth are directly engaged in how programs are developed, implemented, and evaluated. Along with a local youth advisory structure, engaging young people within integrated youth services means that sites include service design, governance, implementation efforts, evaluation processes, and design so site physical spaces are youth-friendly. So here we have defined youth engagement. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk about the different benefits of youth engagement. And we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page when we talk about youth engagement itself. So in order to highlight the principles and practices, we want to acknowledge that there are lots of evidence to highlight the importance of youth engagement. Before speaking about youth engagement itself, first we're going to look at the benefits of this practice for youth. Along with the ones stated on the slide, some of the benefits for youth include promoting positive health, contributing to the development of a positive identity, and enhanced academic outcomes.
Josianne just shared the evidence around the benefits to young people, but as of course you know, there's strong evidence to support that there are benefits to adults, communities, and agencies as well. So for example, engaging with young people can bring new perspectives to decision-making and our sense of belonging within the broader community. From an organizational perspective, evidence supports that youth engagement improves program effectiveness, and it increases an organization's ability to connect and respond to young people's needs within the community. Youth engagement supports intergenerational collaboration, communication, and it supports partnerships. So just as a note, these benefit slides, they can be found in your facilitation guide, and they have the original sources cited.
The evidence is clear. Youth engagement is important. Historically, youth have been systematically excluded from decision-making opportunities, and this has led to worsened pre-existing inequalities in health among young people. A lack of meaningful engagement has created barriers to accessing services and creating services that meet the needs of the young people who use them. The YWHO IYS model is looking at transforming the system and the way that youth access care. As a result, this model is a youth-driven model. The goal of YWHO IYS is that youth are co-creators of all levels of planning, implementation, and evaluation. Essentially, engagement is built into everything that we do.
Health equity is an important piece of integrated youth services. Not only is it important to engage youth with a history of mental health and addictions, it is critical to engage youth from historically underrepresented groups. While the severity of need and prevalence of these youth populations will vary from one site to another, there are communities needing particular consideration, such as developing culturally specific services and engagement strategies. For example, and not limited to, newcomer, immigrant, and racialized youth, Indigenous youth, LGBTQ+ youth, Francophone youth, and youth living with disabilities. To pull out an example, let's focus on Francophone youth. This would mean providing active offer for French services and working with Francophone youth to develop specific engagement strategies and approaches that are relevant to them.
In order to do engagement well and ensure that approaches are relevant, we need to take a whole community approach. We need to recognize that young people are part of a number of communities that need to be considered and meaningfully engaged. When we say that youth engagement takes a whole community approach, this means working with families, natural supports, and community partners to create opportunities for young people to develop meaningful relationships with adults, learn skills, work on issues they're passionate about, and contribute to social change.
So if you take away anything from this webinar, it's that when we're talking about meaningful engagement, positive youth development is at the core. So positive youth development is a strengths-based approach that involves creating opportunities for youth to develop positive relationships and acquire the knowledge and skills they need to make successful transition to adulthood. It focuses on resilience and on building protective factors in a young person's life so they can overcome adverse experiences that come their way. So when we talk about positive youth development, there really are three core components that we're talking about. The first is positive relationships. So we want to create strong intergenerational partnerships among youth and adults. Positive relationships are developed when adults work as allies to support, advocate for, and collaborate with youth throughout their positive development journey. So the second component is positive spaces. And so this is where communities work toward creating spaces with youth that are safe from physical, emotional, and psychological harm. Positive spaces are environments where youth are free to express themselves openly and authentically without fear of discrimination based on their gender, their sex, their sexual orientation, their race, class, appearance, or any other identifying factors. The third is positive opportunities. And this is where youth have access to a variety of opportunities where they can develop important life skills that can contribute to their overall development, prepare them for the future, and help them build healthier communities. So when youth are engaged in issues that affect them personally, they develop a sense of social connectedness and responsibility to the world around them. So as you move forward with your site work, we encourage you to think about how positive youth development can be embedded into the work that you're doing.
While positive youth development is at the core of youth engagement, all of the engagement work that you embark on should be grounded in a set of engagement principles. Put safety first. This is what makes youth engagement different from other types of engagement, ensuring that the young folks that you're meaningfully engaging with are safe as throughout activities. Value youth as community assets. Acknowledging that youth can be active and skilled contributors to their own wellness. Commit to participatory leadership. This builds on the capacity of young people to mobilize around issues that are important to them and contribute to social change. Building authentic relationships. This means honest, open, and transparent relationships. Striving for health equity. As Josianne noted before, this means working to remove barriers and prevent access to care. When striving for health equity, it's important to take an anti-oppressive approach. Given the importance of this principle, our backbone team is creating trainings that will specifically focus on equity. Another principle is meeting youth where they're at. This doesn't just mean their physical location. Folks come to the table with different experiences and expertise. And finally, whole community approach. As we just talked about before, it's important to use a whole community approach when doing youth engagement.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the principles of youth engagement, up on your screen is the star of engagement, and this helps put the principles that we just talked about, it helps put these into practice. So this is a model that was adapted and co-created by young people using Roger Hart's original ladder of participation. And Roger Hart used the ladder to show levels of engagement from manipulation all the way up to partnership. But another way of looking at it is to see, as you'll see here on the slide, that the points of the star are all types of positive youth engagement, and they all can be meaningful if they're structured in the right way. And this model is purposefully not linear. And I'm going to pass it to Josianne to bring it to life a bit more.
Not all efforts and activities can be at a partnership level, although we want to strive to this. Sometimes opportunities may require other points in the star, but what we are trying to avoid are the boxes at the bottom, which are tokenization, manipulation, and decoration. Tokenization. This is where there may be a youth present, but they really don't have any power to influence any decisions, and their contributions aren't taken seriously. It is also when one youth voice is there to represent all youth perspectives. An example would be when there's one marginalized youth in the room, and they are expected to speak on behalf of that population. Manipulation is when youth perspectives are filtered through an adult lens to suit adult needs. An example of this would be giving a youth a script of what to say at an event, and they've never really seen it or had input into it. Lastly, decoration. This is where young people are used to make an organization look better. For example, having photo ops with youth without really explaining to them how the products are going to be used. You can do photo ops, but as long as youth know exactly what's going on and they've given their permission. Also, as Kelli noted, the circle around the star are different types of engagement. Assigned but informed and consulted. So make sure youth know why they are there, what they're being asked to do, and feel equipped to do what they're being asked. Adult-initiated might see adults coming up with an idea and recruiting youth to lead it, and adults may take a step back and work in an advisory capacity. For example, in some communities, organizations put together a proposal and receive funding for a project, and then actively recruit young people to put this plan into action. Youth may also initiate ideas and work with adults to make it happen. For example, youth may want to host an event in the community, and they want to work with adults to support them. Lastly, partnership. Partnership is the ultimate goal of engagement, where there's give and take, respect, shared decision-making, and trust. For example, youth and site staff work together to co-design spaces.
Yeah, so this star could be a tool that you will see engagement coaches and the Backbone team use to help you have conversations and to help guide your engagement work.
Now that we've reviewed the principles and practices of youth engagement, we have a few questions for your consideration. What do you already do well when it comes to youth engagement? And as you think about building your own integrated youth service site, what would the engagement process look like? What would it feel like? If you're watching this as a group, now would be a good time to press pause and take a few minutes to chat through these questions together. Now that we've provided an overview of the principles and practices of youth engagement, we want to move on to review what youth engagement looks like within the YWHO-IYS model. In previous trainings, you would have had an introduction about the core components of this model. This section will focus on the youth engagement core components. YWHO-IYS model has 13 core components that every site will be responsible for implementing. While youth engagement has been highlighted as its own component, we'd encourage folks to think about how youth engagement is embedded throughout all of these different components. For example, in integrated governance, how do you prepare and support youth to meaningfully participate within integrated governance structure? When it comes to equitable and inclusive access and physical space, how have you included youth with accessibility requirements or considerations within your planning? Engagement coaches will be working with each site to explore how youth engagement practices can be embedded into local site development.
So now we want to take some time to unpack the youth engagement core component. So what does this core component look like, and how will we make this happen? When we ask ourselves what we might see when, or what we might envision when young people are meaningfully engaged within integrated youth services. So service design. Youth are included in the discussions about service pathways and spaces created for them to share their opinions and their lived experiences about strengths and potential gaps in services. And so the feedback that they provided would then be incorporated into service design and implementation.
And for the governance pieces, the governance structure will look different within each community. While each hub community will need to have a local youth advisory structure, youth will have a say on what that structure looks like and who is involved in these processes. They can decide how they want to be involved in the governance pieces. For example, some youth may want to sit on a board of directors, while others would rather partake in a working or advisory group. For implementation and evaluation processes, we hope that youth are active members and have an equal voice in the core implementation and evaluation of site activities. Examples of this can include youth as active members on their site's implementation team, and youth as co-developers of client satisfaction surveys.
Youth should also co-design local hub spaces. We know that in certain areas, the physical hub space has already been determined, but young people can be brought into to co-design the space. For example, a floor plan, paint colors, and artwork.
Engagement coaches will work with each site to further unpack what this core component looks like within your specific community. So once again, we have a few questions for your consideration. What are you doing to engage young people in the planning, design, implementation, and evaluation of your site? And what are 2 small things that you can do to improve how you engage youth within your site within the next 2 months? Once again, if you're watching this with a group, now would be a good time to press pause and chat together.
Before we complete this section, we want to briefly speak about the Provincial Youth Advisory Committee. The YWHO Provincial Youth Advisory is an opportunity to build on capacity of young people to mobilize around issues that are important to them. Using a model of co-creation, the Provincial Youth Advisory Group will collaborate with the YWHO backbone to ensure hubs are youth-friendly, responsive to the evolving needs of young people, and are moving towards the goal of a province-wide network of high-quality integrated service sites for youth across Ontario. The hope is to have 2 youth representatives from each of the sites to make up the Provincial Advisory Committee and to meet in person 3 times a year.
So it wasn't just young people who told us that our system needs fixing. Families have said loud and clear that something needs to change. And so what does this look like within a youth-driven model? So here's where I get to introduce Sarah Cannon, who's been involved from the get-go in the selection process, planning and development and implementation of the model, and co-facilitator of the Provincial Family Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Kelly. As we talked about youth engagement and the core components, there are also core components to family engagement, which are true regardless of how you're engaging family, whether it's in a youth-led initiative or not. So the core components are making sure that you have a diverse family perspective, that families are always seen as the experts in their needs as well as their own capacity, and in experts in their experiences as well as supporting their children and youth. You should always be able to identify as well your local structure or mechanism by which you want to engage families. So this is a youth-driven initiative. So we want to highlight here the importance of family engagement and family voice at all levels. However, still identify that within a youth-driven initiative, there are probably some differences in how you might engage families. First, I think it's important that we understand when we define family that it is a broad definition of family, defined as a circle of care and support that offers enduring commitment to care for one another, related either biologically, emotionally, culturally, or legally, and it takes into account those who the person with lived experience identifies as significant to their well-being. That definition, as well as the others that we will review in this module, have been co-created with families, service providers, advocates, and have always been grounded in the evidence and informed by practice. We talked about the STAR of engagement, which is based on Roger Hart's ladder of participation. And when we talk about family engagement, we also talk about Roger Hart's ladder of participation. And engagement is at the highest end of that ladder. And the definition for family engagement is that it is an ongoing partnership that includes families as active decision makers and equal partners in treatment, service delivery and at the individual, organization, and system level. And here's where you might say, well, how can we partner and have families be active decision makers within a youth-led initiative? Sometimes within the youth-led initiative, it will be only appropriate to involve or consult families. So making sure that they are supportive and participating in the site, that they are supportive and creating home environments that support what the children or youth are doing at the site, and also being part of the collaborative with the broader community. I think that one of the ways that we can differentiate between when it's appropriate to involve versus engage families is think about ultimately who the end user might be. If it is a service or a resource that is being designed for the youth, then your partners should be with the youth. However, if there are times within your site that you will be developing a resource or a service specific to families, then you should always be trying to engage and partner with families in that development. Another tip would be in differentiating between involvement and engagement. Engagement is a two-way conversation, a dialogue, where you are starting from scratch in essence and building to a co-developed product. Involvement or consultation is much more one-way communication. You might be asking some questions, asking for some input, and getting it back. And again, if you are designing something specifically for youth within this youth-led initiative, I think that you need to consider who your partners are, and that would be the youth. Families should be involved and should have opportunities to consult, but you do not want to imply that if you are going to partner with families that they are the ones that are making decisions, if truly it is the youth that are making decisions. So let's talk about what that might look like in these specific examples. So space design. Who is going to be using the space? Designing space for a youth-friendly space should be done with the youth. The first conversation would be with the youth. Families do not need to be partners in the space design unless you are creating a space that will be specific to families. Families can be involved in the conversation, but you also need to be clear and create an understanding with the families about who the space is for. Brand adaptation. If the brand for a youth-driven model is to attract youth, then they should be your partners in that brand adaptation. The way that families would consult or partner with you might not help you achieve your end goal of reaching out and having it resonate with the youth. You can talk to families and ask them if anything brings up red flags from a family perspective, bring those conversations back to the youth, maybe let the families know why or what the youth said or why and their decisions around that, giving them context. But again, if it is about the preference of youth and it is tailored for the youth, then the feedback that is considered by the youth should lead the table. If something about the branding, though, would mean that families would prevent allowing their youth or from supporting their youth to attend, that does need to be a consideration in your conversations. Service pathway design. Two things come to mind when it comes to this example. There are sites that want to provide support to families, and when designing those supports, obviously you have to co-design them with families. However, you need to layer this on top of the consultations you've had with youth. So for example, if the youth have definitively said they do not want to have families with their own space, that doesn't mean you cannot provide support to families. You just might need to consider where that support might be provided. Co-develop a service pathway to those supports with families. Within this process, have a conversation about where the service will be and how to navigate for access. Talk about what that looks like. And again, ensure that you are communicating back to the youth what those families are asking, what their context is as well. One of the opportunities around co-development is being able to navigate how youth will fit within other services. So how your site is going to fit within other services. Here's an opportunity maybe to get some input from families as well as youth about how they understand service system and how the YWHO sites are fitting in amongst that. As with the other sections, we have a question for your consideration. So when it comes to engaging versus involving family members, what ways might you involve families at your site, and in what opportunities might there be for you to engage families at your site? So again, if you're working in a team, now is a good time to pause and have this conversation.
So to summarize, we've gone over some of the principles and practices of meaningful youth engagement, and we've given you a sense of how this fits in as a core component of the YWHO Integrated Youth Services model. And we did the same for family engagement, and Sarah went through some of the ways family members can support and be supported within the model using some really tangible examples. So within this model, you have access to engagement coaches within your backbone team to help guide and support you along the way. And we really look forward to working with you. So on behalf of our whole team, I'd like to thank Josianne and Sarah as youth and co-family presenters in this webinar for helping to build and create this webinar with us. Thank you.